Good afternoon. In the last session, we had discussed ways of risk reduction, which included early warning system, community participation. We have also discussed a typical case on how to assess, how to work out priority risk index, which has a direct bearing on preparedness and a little bit on standard operating procedure. Today we'll take it further. That is the part 2 of the session, and discuss based on guidelines available how to prepare SDMP, that is State Disaster Management Plans, its framework, evaluation, community participation in risk reduction. Then we discuss some more points on SOP, that is Standard Operating Procedures, and budget. On the budget, we'll have some discussion on MHA guidelines and some whatever given in the DM-Act 2005. We'll also discuss challenges in management and okay. So we'll take it for, we'll have a short discussion on last mile challenges in disaster management, and today we are going to end the session for which there is a small homework that we have suggested. I hope you will all like it. All right. So as per the DM Act, every state and every line ministry is supposed to have their disaster management plan based on the experience, based on the data available. The basic features of the DM plan should have general issues, including broad vulnerability profile of the state, vulnerability profile of the state, hazard evaluation. These are two important aspects in disaster management. It will also comprise other thematic issues such as community-based disaster management, preparedness on medical side, generation, awareness generation, the training needs, etc., etc. And there are many cross-cutting issues in the disaster management that cross-cutting natural, man-made, and different type of natural. Then there are some disaster-specific issues which are different for different states, different, and within states, different locations. As we know, some areas are prone to earthquakes, some areas are prone to cyclone, like that. Then coordinating and monitoring mechanism, the role of elders, senior citizens, and elderly locally respected leaders. These locally respected leaders are like VIPs. The role of NGOs, etc., and the role of urban and local bodies. Particularly, as we have a setup of Gram Panchayat, the SDMPs or the State Disaster Management Plan should actually take the grassroots level information that is starts with Gram Panchayat. Okay. Then it will have framework, various topics to be discussed. That is, every disaster management plan should have various sections covering the different aspects of the disasters. The operational aspect, the administrative aspect, financial aspect, legal aspects, and the process of disaster management. Detailed SOPs, standard operating procedures of each department should be available, and it should be available to the people who are connected, and it should be there as a part of SDMPs. Then there are disaster specific action plan. That is, let us say cyclone, earthquake, landslide, forest fire. All these are under various types of disasters, natural, and our focus is mainly on CBRN. So chapter 13 covers chemical disasters. Chapter 14 should cover nuclear disasters. That also includes radiological. And chapter 15 is biological disasters. Then it should have details information on infrastructure. The current infrastructure, as we know, has it's always good to have good infrastructure. Whatever is there today is not found adequate in many cases. So there is a need to improve the infrastructure. And this process, this policy proposes that stockpiles of the established stockpiles be available. Food, non-food items should be stocked. Construction of hospitals, which are under the cross-cutting subjects. Also, every type of disasters require hospitals and the tertiary hospital for CBRN system, because for CBRN situations, we need, in the COVID time, we have seen there was a separate COVID ward in all the hospitals government directed. Similarly, in CBRN situation, if it is radiological, if it is chemical, we need that type of trained medical staff and trained paramedics and equipment, instrument, and even let us say in radiological cases, the hospital should have separate storage facility to take care of radiological waste that is generated after taking care of the contaminated patients. Then collaboration with different government departments, with local authorities, a minimum of dedicated hotlines. This is very, very important, that communication makes very important part. See, whether it is early warning system or whether it is follow-up system, communication is very, very important. So there should be direct hotlines. And nowadays, responders are equipped with satellite phones. Okay, then human and non-human resources in order to increase the capacity to respond quickly to disasters. Inventories of human and non-human resources should be kept and maintained at the local, district, and national levels. Without any, it does not require any discussion. Training needs assessment at all levels, the type of training required for particular type of disasters, and more important for CBRN, which demands a different type of training and different equipment setup. Then logistical arrangements, due to lack of adequate equipment material, disaster response is badly affected. So these are all to be, as far as possible, planned and response, and their details should be available, including the details and its location. Community participation has to be included in all disaster management state plans at every level, whether it is district level or every level. Okay. So community participation is very, very important. And I also particularly feel, based on my own experience, participation of community, we are going to discuss this slightly more further, has a role everywhere. It has a role in mitigation. It has a role in risk management. It has a role in response, saving life, saving property. See, active involvement of people, active involvement of community in making decisions about the implementation of the process, programs, and projects can affect them. Community participation motivates people to work together. See, when individuals become a group, a community in that area, it also generates a community feeling which recognizes the benefits of their involvement. They also get feeling. They enable people to explain their vulnerabilities and priorities. The principal resource available for mitigating or responding to disasters is people themselves and their local knowledge and expertise. A very important thing, the community is local. So because they are local, they have better knowledge of the area. They have also better knowledge, better expertise to take care of the local issues. Then the process of working and achieving things together can strengthen community. It reinforces local organization, building of confidence, skills, capacity to cooperate, awareness, and critical appraisal. In this way, it increases potential for reducing their vulnerability. It empowers people more generally by enabling them to tackle other challenges. individually and as a whole community, that is collectively. Participatory risk reduction initiatives are likely to be sustainable because they build on local. See, it is like you say, for a good house to be built, the foundation has to be strong. So just an analogy I'm giving. If the community is prepared, if the community participates at every stage of disaster management planning, naturally the management portion is very well taken care. Community participation in planning and implementation projects accords with people's right to participate in decisions that affect their lives. See, if they are also part of the planning, if they are also part of the decision making, they can better understand and they are responsible for whatever is the effect, how much successful is the disaster management. It is therefore important part of the democratization in society. In our country, which is a very vibrant democracy, it is also important that those people, whether they are affected or they are making preparation, are part and they are part of the management plan. Participatory approaches may be more cost effective. I think it's very well understood because they understand things better. So the wastage also will be less. So it is more cost effective. Those who are not local, those who are outside people. Let us say outside is not in the meaning that they are outsiders, but outside means they have no perfect local knowledge. They are like external agents. They cannot cope alone with the disaster management when it comes to a locality. So it is very useful to keep the local people in the loop. Now we move further that disaster management preparedness hangs around risk evaluation, which is a main planning criteria. The potential loss of life, injury, or destroyed or damaged assets which could occur to a system, society, or a community in a specific period of time. Determined probabilistically a function of hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and capacity. Okay. Then the definition of disaster risk reflects the concept of hazardous events and disasters as the outcome of continuously present conditions of risk. Disaster risk comprises different types of potential losses, which are often difficult to quantify. Now, this is very important. See, the disaster or the risk, the damage or the hazard or the vulnerability, they all are probabilistic. They are all random in nature, and it is not possible to find out or to accurately predict, in difficult to quantify every aspect. Nevertheless, with knowledge of the hazards, knowledge of the prevailing hazards, and the patterns of population and socio-economic development, disaster risk can be assessed and mapped in broad terms. Broad terms means one should understand it will not have a very fine accuracy about the damages, about the potential damages. Okay, we have already discussed this in the stage 1 of our discussion. The risk, hazard, exposure, impact, and probability. The risk is defined in so many methods. It is described in so many ways. Those who are in the financial risk, those who are in the health risk, those who are in disaster risk. But for us, it is important, it is sufficient to understand risk is a multiplication or a relation of hazard and vulnerability. Okay. We have also discussed what is acceptable risk and what is residual risk. So I will not elaborate it further. We'll go further. We'll go next. Now, risk reduction through community action. This is nothing but the participants of community or the actions of the community will have great influence in the risk management or the how to reduce the risk. The generation, interpretation, translation, and communication of warning information. Whatever warning comes, whatever hazard details come, whatever is vulnerability. If it is properly interpreted, if it is properly generated, if the data is properly understood, properly utilized, it has a great effect on risk reduction. And then the community building of, then the capacity building of community. That means that the community's capacity is enhanced, if the community is trained, if the community equipment is given in time. Let us say in CBRN cases, most important is detection. Detection is the most important of any CBRN event or CBRN emergency. If the community is prepared, this can be detected in time and the measures can be taken. Now, community building of communities through catalytic government intervention. Now, see, it is now accepted that in disaster management, government has the primary role, and government has the role. So, if the community is kept poised, community is kept prepared, community is kept equipped through government intervention, it has important role in risk reduction. Okay, and for risks, the indicators are vulnerability and resilience are multidimensional. It is difficult for vulnerability and risk analysis to collect data on every. So indicators means what are the various aspects, like in the previous lecture we discussed something on risk index. It is a similar thing that indicators that are easiest to measure. Some indicators which are very easy to measure are not very useful. Okay, like what very easy to measure is how many people lost life, how many people vanished, or how many people disappeared. Now, this is easiest to measure, but they are not very useful in disaster management. I mean, useful, but not very useful because it does not help in preparedness. See, it can only be useful in the next incident to quantify that last time so much property and life lost. This time, comparatively, it is less. Even with the guidance in mind, it is rare to find all the evidence required. Indicators are indicators. They are not necessarily final proof. I think this one should understand because the indicators are also, I mean, the indicators means whatever type of indicators used for risk management or vulnerabilities or hazard evaluation, they are very much local and they also depend upon varieties of factors, weather condition that time, the incident time, and so many things. Okay, let us say if something happens in a very crowded area and something happens in a less crowded area, the damage will be less. So the indicators are always with some ifs and buts. Experience as the work progress may highlight other issues and require changes to the project. Some indicators may have to be modified or new ones will have to emerge. So it is important to be flexible. That means an indicator, what indicator means, let us say a data which has come for a particular past area, how that can be factored in risk management, how it can be factored in reducing the disaster risk in future. Now, monitoring methods should be designed to pick up these issues so that the decision can be made. And there is a word called indicator dilemma. Indicator dilemma. This is a word that means how nicely or how roughly an indicator or a situation can be used for planning the disaster. Let us say the disaster management plan. Let us say somebody gets a data of a particular wind velocity has caused this type of damage in a particular area. Now the question is how this can be used in a particular state management plan. That will greatly vary. I mean, that will vary. If it is not greatly, it will vary because if there is a minor situation of geographical situation or some weather conditions or some, I mean, let us say demographic conditions. So the users who are using it for disaster management plan document, they are under the dilemma, no indicator dilemma. That means some weightage has to be given and some weightage has to be taken. Okay. Now community-based disaster risk reduction. Now So as we are discussing, this point is coming again and again. The community is a very important factor in disaster management, but community as such has to be trained, equipped. A very simple example: if there is a place where there is a flood area, and the flood area you have to have a house in a particular way, or let us say in an earthquake area, and the community has to be prepared how to build houses. Now, how to build houses have to be done by the same local community. And the local mason, if the local mason is trained how to make those houses, what material to be used, and what is not to be done, that simple training can save a lot of community damages in the future incidents like this. Similarly, imparting awareness and training to farmers in water harvesting. It can help them in simple ways how to manage flood situation. Or let us say water harvesting is slightly different, but that water harvesting is very useful in case of drought condition when there is a water scarcity. And alternate livelihood option. Suppose something happens and there is a long time repercussions, then the local community has to be trained how to survive and how to lead normal life by alternate methods. Now let us have a little discussion now on standard operating procedure. Okay, so let us have a discussion on standard operating procedure. Now, standard operating procedure, you will all agree, have a big role to play, slightly involved working process, which also involves a lot of attributes. It also involves many agencies where people have to work as per the rule and not much of discretion. It is always good to make standard operating procedure as a standalone document as far as possible. But let me be clear, a standalone document does not mean that this SOP can be used by anybody. This also mandates that those who are using SOP, they are aware of the details. They are also trained enough to understand the terminology. Otherwise, let us say if there is a medical SOP, if there is a chemical SOP, if there is biological SOP, or something which involves instruments, something which involves technology, this cannot be used by anybody else. It may be of no use if an untrained person is seeing the document or seeing the SOP. So SOP are developed as a standalone document, but the reason what I've told you, that describes steps and key actions required for, in particular case, post disaster recovery. Let us say the SOP is a general term nowadays used even in budget making, in finance, and so many places. But here we are talking about disaster management. SOPs are specific to a particular operation. Now, particular operation means SOPs are specific to a particular operation, and in that operation, the features and the attributes which are there, they have to be kept in mind. SOPs always have a target group. That means SOPs are intended to serve as a guide for officials responsible. See, those who are using SOP, as I mentioned in the just earlier, that they have to be familiar with the SOP language, the terminology, and the location. See, SOP of one location cannot be used by another location because they will find it difficult to understand. Because even the local terminologies, local area locations have to be understood. Now, the SOPs are a bit flexible. I would say, personally speaking, it should be minimum flexible. But in cases where the local variables are not very well documented, it has to be flexible because it is seen by only experienced and trained people. So no harm if there are some deviations. Okay. So the institutional disaster response teams, DRTs, at head offices or central level, including the field level team led by institutional focal point, should determine the appropriate timing and duration for initiating and completing the plan, disaster response plan. Recognizing that multiple disasters may cause difficulty if there is a change in the situation, it can lead to a situation which will find it difficult for somebody to follow the SOP in the interest of the situation. Okay. Now, these are, I have listed some of them. There are a long list of attributes. Any SOP should have scope, the purpose, the basic philosophy, and the priorities. So in the scope, the type of emergency, the start, the steps, and the stop. These are all included. That means if the type of emergency is a chemical emergency, then the SOP starts at what point, what are the major steps, and it stops at what point. Because end of SOP is not end of the disaster management. Then it should have the purpose. The purpose is stop, act. That means stopping those who are using SOP, act in a right way during an emergency, reduce operational error, do not much depend on individuals. And the 4 W's or SOPs: who, what, where, and when. These are the 4 points which are addressed in SOP. As we have said, it should be as much as possible standalone, but people have to, if I to tell it lightly, they have to use their brain also around with this. And I find Indian disaster responders use their brain better. I mean, not to say that others are not doing, but I find my country responders are better in spite of documents, in spite of everything. They also use their experience and judgment in the best interest of the situation. And as we already know, in SOP or in disaster management, the priorities are always life, property, and environment. So in SOP, you always try to save the life first. The second is priority. This we have also discussed in the earlier session. And the response time for life is less, for property it is more, and for environment it is longer. All right. So SOP attributes in CBR and emergency in particular, the activities, the hazards, the response time. Now, response time is known to us. See, in chemical emergencies, the response time is in minutes and hours. Very, very fast. Otherwise, we lose precious life. In case of radiological and nuclear cases, the response time is slightly more, or let us say we talk in hours and maybe days. And in biological, the whole world now has become very learned after this COVID experience. It goes on for long. Then the rescue modes, equipment, instrument, responders, first aid, law and order. These are all SOPs because in some places we seriously require law and order situation to be managed. Then the medical intervention, like medical people know, triaging is very important and the SOP, if possible, can define triaging and alternate backup plans in case something fails. So one important thing in SOP is that after everything is written, and as I've said, it may require some flexibility, the situation may demand work under the given conditions. If the condition changes, SOP may require some change, and work under given condition is the key. All right. Then SOP should possibly identify the responsibility and authority. It should be clear and easy to understand. I mean, it is very simple. I don't have to elaborate. And it can also make an algorithm of command and control system. Like any other document, SOPs require review. Now, this review is not time bound alone, maybe time bound, and also depends upon the data update from the various incidents, or let us say new situations that just come. Then also update in the technology. Then it should be approved, because this is one area where I have personally found lot of SOPs are there in so many places. Some people call it a green blue book or blue book or yellow book. or emergency book or emergency management book. And I found in many places, I particularly found in place, the approval is pending. So the approval gives a sense of responsibility and seriousness. So it should be always an approved document. Then SOP should also insist for uh, frequent communication exercise among the stakeholders and the regular exercise with all agencies. It should identify multitasking in case of radiological emergency, ALARA, then TDS, time distance shielding. Now we move slightly to a different discrete topic, that is, we will see now. Now, at this time, I discuss mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction. Now, mainstreaming is a topic which is used as per the our Disaster Management Act 2005, wherein it has been mentioned that disaster management is not in a reactive manner, it is in a proactive manner. That should be part and parcel of any government, any line ministry or any state or district's main plan. It is not that if disaster happen, we will see at that time. It is proactive. That means it should be part and parcel of the system. So that is called mainstream. So disaster can set back. Now, why it is required? Because a disaster can set back significantly the development of an affected region and even beyond, depending on its size, significance, scale, reversing decades of accumulated gain. Whatever development we have, if a disaster comes, it can set you back by decades unless until it is properly handled, managed. Development without recognizing disaster probabilities and incorporating adequate risk reduction could, in effect, worsen existing risk. I think this is very clear. Development without recognizing disaster. That means if the disaster is not mainstream, if we insist only on development, okay, we have big cities, lot of electricity, lot of IT things, everything, without knowing that this area is flood prone. And in one flood, everything is damaged. So that can damage everything and we are not able to move further. We are again like 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward. So it is important that disaster is part and parcel, that no disaster should set you back, not set you back by years and decades. So mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction or mainstreaming of disaster is the extensive and should integration, and that has to be taken very seriously. It is the extensive and sound integration of DRR into the all development should be taken. Now, why this topic came in between as a bridge is we will now have a discussion on budget. That means everything depends, circulates, encircles around budget, resources one can keep, one can apportion, reserved for disasters or in the disaster response expenses or disaster response logistics, whatever is required at that time. The budget criteria hangs around disaster mainstreaming, budget, and 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 the data which is available. See, ultimately, the resources are, let us say, limited. One cannot have the all entire resources dedicated or a portion to only budget, only for disaster management. It has to take care of the normal life. It has to also take care of the normal development of that area. So the word government has to take a portion of its revenue collection, its tax collection. That revenue is basically mostly tax in form of tax, most of it. So part of it, that means part of the revenue is kept as a divisible pool of resources that represents a certain percentage of the tax revenue of government and is shared with the state governments. This percentage is determined by an expert finance body, which is called Finance Commission. Now Niti Aayog. The divisional pool has been set at 42%. Therefore, if the Finance Commission has recommended an allocation of 12.5% each for the National Disaster Relief Fund, NDRF, and State Disaster Relief Fund, SDRF. It means that a total of 25% of divisible pool of the resource is earmarked for disaster response. And the remaining 75% of the divisible pool, so 25% is marked for National Disaster Relief Fund and State Relief Fund. The 75% of is available for other purposes and is distributed among the states using the Finance Commission criteria, which typically include population, fiscal capacity, and special need states factors, additional factors. Now, in terms of numbers, the disaster SDRF, the State Disaster Response Fund, constituted under section such and such of Disaster Management Act 2005, is the primary fund available with the state governments. The central government contributes 75% of SDRF allocation for general category states and 90% for special categories. Special category states get more funds because of the prevailing disaster or natural disaster prone conditions. Let us say we all know Northeast is highly earthquake and flood borne, and lot of hilly terrain makes even the response a bit more challenging. Then Sikkim, I mean Uttarakhand, we know again because of its Himalayan terrain and flood. Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, these are all known to us. These geographies are difficult geographies. Then SDRF shall be used only for meeting the expenditure for providing immediate relief to the victim. Now, this is very important. The fund which is given for disaster have to be utilized only for that person that cannot. And there's a guideline we are going to discuss in the couple of PPTs down. Then this money cannot be used for any other purpose, just like that. Then disasters covered under SDRF, that means State Disaster Relief Funds, or these are the natural disasters. Okay. Now, SDRF constituted under section, this is the primary fund available with the state government for response to this. And this we have just discussed. This portion is now repeated, so I will skip it. Then the local state government may use up to 10% of the funds available under the SDRF for providing immediate relief. See, this in a disaster, time is important. That means one situation in general, every situation in general demands immediate relief. Immediate relief means immediately. Now, immediate can be defined in terms of days, in terms of weeks, like that, but immediate relief. I mean, this is after the response and relief. Okay. Now, this is for slightly longer term. That means we all know that in COVID time, people who lost their life, their family members were given a lot of help by cash help and other state government related help, state government funded help. Similarly, 10% of the fund is available with the state government for this purpose. And NDRF, that means National Disaster Response Relief Fund, constituted under Section 46 of the Act, supplements SDRF further. Now, these are all key fund utilization policy. Now, there is a need for all these funds to be harmonized. Establishment of a common basket disaster fund, that is there. Then we have discussed a bit earlier. For all, that means there is a need for all these funds to be harmonized for effective management and use in case of a disaster. All stakeholders in disaster management should contribute to the DM fund. Now, stakeholders are not limited to only central government, state government, or limited number of agencies. Now, this can be even private people. This can be also industries which are in the area of disaster management. So, all stakeholders in disaster management should contribute to the disaster management fund. Private organizations will be encouraged to contribute a percentage of their corporate social responsibility funds to the National Disaster Management Fund. Amendments should also be made. I mean, this is just a suggestion part. We leave it there. A board of the policy proposes the establishment of the National Disaster Management Trust Fund. Every line ministry should normally have budget line and their method of arranging, their method of utilization. The DM Act provided for the establishment of fund to be called the National Disaster Fund for meeting any threatening disaster situation or disaster. Now, these are the 2 points. Fund to be called National Disaster Mitigation Fund. Now, these are all, one portion of it goes to mitigation, other portion goes to response. Now, response is something which is like unavoidable, and that is done during the disaster time. Whereas disaster mitigation can be done with slightly peaceful manner. So this is the financial mechanism. Chapter 11 of the section 41 of the DM Act states that the state government shall immediately, after notifications of constituting the state authority and district authorities, establish for the purpose of this act, that means the Disaster Management Act 2005, fund to be called as State Disaster Response Fund, District Disaster Response Fund, then same thing for mitigation areas. Okay, now this is the requirement of DM Act. The state government will leave this. Okay, disaster mitigation planning and strategy. Mitigation is already known. It is like reducing the effect of disaster related damage or losses, which can be done before disaster and during disaster. The state mitigation fund shall be employed. Now, these are the two. The mitigation fund, state disaster mitigation fund shall be employed for supporting mitigation projects. Okay. Now, mitigation projects have a channel. Now, this can be done in a planned manner as a part of engineering or technological efforts by the state or by the district or by the national government, which can define or which can process as a project. Now, government projects are processed depending upon their utilization, its usefulness for the public, and the size of the project in terms of cost. So there are guidelines for this. Then materials and methods, deliverables, financial budgeting, timeline, profile of the processing or implementing. These are the various details to be worked out. If some state is interested or some interest is working out projects on disaster mitigation. That means materials and methods, depending on the project. Let us say in case of CBRN, the materials will also include instruments, equipment, safety gadgets, dresses, like that, and maybe for handling of radioactive materials, radioactive waste, separate arrangements are required that we will discuss when we when we cover those subjects. Then, very important thing is the project timeline is always maximum 3 years or less than that. More than 3 years is not taken under these mitigation projects. Okay. Now, these are a typical case of one state we have taken. This is ineligible activities and eligible activities. These are the activities which are accepted under the project. These are the activities not accepted under the project. So these are like ineligible. The following list provides a few examples of activities that are not ineligible for a state disaster management funding for one typical state. Now, this should not be taken as universal. Now, one state government plan, that means Himachal Pradesh plan, that gives list of what are the projects which are not eligible. It is list here. You can have like projects that do not reduce the risk, the projects which are for actual physical work, the project that create revolving loan funds, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Now let us say what are all eligible. The eligible mitigation measures or activities typical under this is capacity building. Capacity building means training and equipping, public awareness, that is also part of training. Now the training is a very wide topic because training, the level of training, the period of training, the extent of training, the public, and then retraining, refresher. It is a continuous process. Yes, things have to be kept poised. I have experience in many places. We have given very detailed training to some agencies, responders. After 2 years, we find many of the responders have been transferred or promoted or they have been shifted. So it is not a loss. Anyway, wherever they are there, their knowledge will be useful. But for taking care of the disaster response in that area, for that subject, it is important that that area has to be augmented by retraining or refresher training and upgrading the training because of change in the technology, upgradation in the technology. So these are the list of eligible mitigation measures or activities. Training plays important role. So I leave it here. Now there is a guideline given by Ministry of Home Affairs on budget side. So just go through it. It does not make disaster management responders not of great use, but is you are all taking care of the complete spectrum of disaster management. I request you to be familiar with it. Okay. Now, Fifth Phase Commission has recommended an allocation of 12.5% each of National Disaster Response Fund and State Disaster Response Fund, 10% the total corpus of NDRF, that means National Disaster Risk Management Fund, and SDRMF for the funding window for the preparedness and capacity building. So 12.5% and 10%. And MHA gives a guideline on this, which is quite elaborate, and it is given section by section. You please have a look. There is not much to discuss in this. I will move on. Resource allocation and Government of India is part of the Sendai framework, where 187 countries have sort of adopted or placed for disaster risk reduction. Now, this risk reduction involves upgradation, funding, resources. These guidelines are pertaining to funding window. So these are all part of the Sendai framework, which we have earlier also touched upon. Resource allocation and earmarking of funds for NDRF and SDRF. The aggregate size of the preparedness and capacity building funding window for each of the financial years, 2020-20, this is typical, is in the amount of 1,239 crores under NDRF and 2,898 crores under SDRF. That is 12.5% of the allocation of respective funds. Okay, now project handling, we have already also said for mitigation, whatever projects are below 100 crores, they are processed and cleared by subcommittee National Executive Committee. That's called SCNEC. And the projects above 100 crores is placed before high-level committee, that is called HLC, along with the recommendations of subcommittee NEC. The high-level committee will approve the proposal for undertaking preparedness and capacity building activities. MHA on approval by subcommittee NEC, National Executive Committee, and high-level committee shall recommend to the Department of Expenditure. Now this goes to ministry for approval because the budget is more than 100 crore. These are all the government limits. Okay. Now budget we have discussed. This portion plays an important role in mitigation response because your resources, because budget also reflects in the availability of manpower. So we will briefly discuss this last mile challenges in disaster management. This is because last mile challenges in disaster management, which is an uncertain terrain. It's a difficult terrain, unknown terrain. The last mile process poses the most significant challenge in disaster management. Very simple. If the help or the relief does not reach to the last mile, or let us say the person who is there in the ground zero, it is as good as the management has not worked. I would not say the management has failed, but it is inadequate. Now, if it is inadequate by 5% or 10%, 20%, but it has led to the failure of all other efforts, which is, let us say, 100%. It is an important link in the DM command and control as it faces limited infrastructure, communication issues, and logistical constraints. The ground zero situation cannot be accurately predicted and may be quite different from the design thought. This puts extra responsibility on the disaster response teams at the ground zero. See, last mile means the area which is affected by disaster or by emergency. All right. In case of severe emergency, the worst area in, let us say, radiological emergency is called hot spot. Hot spot. In chemical emergency, where the chemical has started leaking or chemical has started affecting the area. So this is where the effect is maximum, the effect is worst. Whereas the response may come from the nearby areas or from area, let us say in 1 hour, 2 hours, depending upon how the responders are positioned, how the teams are available. This may be different because the whole geography of the country is not uniform. It may be very different than whatever a designer or the owner planner has felt. So this cannot be predicted. So it cannot be predicted means this requires some modification in the SOP or some response strategies to be modified. The final success of disaster management effort is rated by how the most affected location or victim receives the relief in a desired manner. Desired manner means not whatever is available. Desired manner means what is minimum required, which can save the life, which can help the person, or which can save the property to the extent possible. The use of data in similar situations will be of good use to manage the challenges of the last mile. Now, this is very important because we keep on updating the disaster response system, and the use of data, last data, is of important use for planning the last mile, for handling the last mile situation. Okay, and but the good thing is, with so much of seriousness, so much of learning, so much of data sharing, the technical advantages, technical advances have become part of the disaster management at every stage, and very, I would say, useful in the last mile. Last mile means, let us say, communication, transportation, big effect of social media, big use of social media. Let us say the use of drone in reaching to the last mile is significantly adding to the last mile process. That means technological advances is significantly added to the last mile process. So I hope this point will be discussed further, but I have a small suggestion. The suggestion is, take a little homework. Think about it. and write a short essay, write a short note, let's say approximately 200 words, on how to improve last mile process in case of radiological emergency management. Write a short note on how to improve last mile process in case of radiological emergency management. Okay, and it could be about 200 words. You are not bound by this suggestion. Try to submit it in 48 hours. Try to submit it in 2 days time. And you can give it to send it through email to the email IDs that you've already got about it from HBNI. And I will have a look. And in my next lecture, which is after this, my next session, I will mention about it. And we will share some information about it. So thank you very much. Till the next session. Thank you.